Yeah, they're ready. Hi y'all. In today's video I'm going to be going over how I added a hydraulic brake to my old POS Schwinn here. I'll show you all the tools you need and how to install it, front and rear. I'm changing the front rotor to a 180 from a 160, and my rear rotor is bent from a accident. You might call it a crash. So I'm going to swap out the front rotor to the back and show you how all that's done. Welcome to my shop. Today I'm going to show you how I can change out these crappy brakes that came on this bike with Shimano 200s hydraulic. Get the bike in the stand here. First thing we're going to want to do is remove the front wheel. Pretty simple to take the front wheel off. If you have the quick QRs, you can do this without a bike stand if you want, but I kind of consider a bike stand just absolutely important if you're going to work on bicycles. Especially if you're going to like adjust your derailleur. If you don't have a bike stand, how are you gonna crank the cranks and adjust at the same time if you don't have something to hold the bike off the floor? So there's no need to take the skewer out. I just use a trash can to lay a wheel on. I'm going to be changing the front rotor to a 180. What came on this bike was just a 160. You want to be careful not to touch the rotor surface with your hands, because the oils from your hands will get on the rotor, and that's one of the things that causes squeaking. All new rotors should come with new screws with new Loctite on them. So first thing you do is just take off the old rotor. I just break them loose first of all. It's probably a pretty good idea to wear rough plastic gloves for this, in case you do touch the rotor surface. I'm going to be putting this rotor, moving it to the back of the bike, keeping it at 160, because this back rotor here was damaged in a fall. I got it pretty straight, but it isn't perfect. Of course, you can reuse these screws if you like. Nothing wrong with them, just use new Loctite. Take your new rotor. Should have an arrow indicator on it as to the direction of motion. Stick it on there. Screw it down with the new screws. Okay. Start them all in. And then lock them down in a star pattern like you would putting on a tire on a car. And you can torque them to spec. There. Okay. Voila. Now we have the new disc on. Untouched. Now, next thing we're going to do is remove the caliper. It takes a 5mm. By the way, if you're changing out a all-in-one shifter brake combo lever, when you change to hydraulic brakes, you're going to have to buy new shift levers also. And we got a retainer clip here. You'll reuse this clip. Holds the cable. Okay, next thing you're going to want to do is take off the grips. I use P&W component grips. I like them. Slide that baby off. And slide your dropper post off. And go back to your 5mm. Take off your lever. Now, seeing how you're going to have to change all this out, you got to go to the 3x and take the cable off. Using cable cutters, remove the old cable end. If you're not already on the small chain ring, go ahead and shift to it. Remove cable from the derailleur. Next, pull the cable completely out. Now the all-in-one is completely removed from the bike. Install the new caliper with the 180mm spacer. Next, put the clip back on and remember to route the cable inside the fork. Next, install the new shift cable all the way down to the shifter. Slide the new shifter on the handlebars, then the brake lever. Remember, never push that brake lever without a spacer in the caliper. Next, slide on the dropper post lever. Snug down the barrel adjuster and then open it back up 2 turns. This will allow for some adjustment in the future. Slide everything temporarily into position. Next, slide on your grip and snug it down. Okay, let's reinstall the front wheel, being careful not to touch the brake disc surface. Next, while holding the front brake lever on, tighten the caliper down and torque the spec. This will center the pads. Okay, let's put the bike on the floor and set up the cockpit. You can refer to the right side to get the angles, and of course you can adjust them later to get them perfect. Okay, on these 3x shifters, I got my cable run down through the eye, and these things can be a little testy to get right, but basically you want just the smallest amount of slack in here. Now, seeing how this was working before I took it apart, you have to understand that the small sprocket and the biggest sprocket are, the chain is set by the limit screws. The middle sprocket is set by cable tension. So I know that with just the slightest a bit of slack in this cable, it should be pretty close to being right. So I'm going to nip it down there. Okay, I know that's going to be fairly close, so I'm going to leave a little bit extra here. And here's another good point. When you're cutting this cable, use cable cutters. Don't use dikes, don't use anything else. And then when we get it adjusted, we'll put the little end on it to keep it from fraying. But I want to see if it shifts first. Okay, it went up to second pretty good. And went all the way up to the big one. Good. Now let's see if it goes back down right. Perfect. Perfect. May not have to adjust that any more than that. So we'll cut our cable to the final length and put the little goober on it. You want to leave just enough for a future adjustment. Now here's another thing you need the proper tool for, is crimpers. Don't use needle nose, don't use regular pliers, use crimpers to crimp with. Get her all lined up. Crimp her down. Now I want that pretty much against the frame just like that, so it doesn't hit the pedal going around, which it won't. Whew. Just went out in the yard to bed in the brakes, that front brake, and I'll tell you, I wish I had a hill here, but I live in North Florida and there's no hills around my house. So it was like accelerate 30 times and slow down half slow, half of that, and then 30 more or 20 more times and slow down with more braking. And they're powerful brakes now. In fact, they worked pretty good at first, believe it or not. So I wanted to show you how to shorten the hydraulic line, but the front brake, as it turns out, is the exact same length I need, which surprises me. I know the rear brake is going to require shortening, so I'm going to go ahead and do the rear. It's done exactly like the front, basically. So I'm going to do the rear, and I'll pick it back up when I get to shortening the brake line, show you how to do that. Okay, I've installed the brakes. The back brake just like the front one. And now what we're going to want to do is cut the hydraulic hose to the right length. First thing you want to do is get this thing level, get your brake handle level, so the fill hole will be at the top. Then you determine how much you want to cut off. I've made a small mark here where that spot is. Pull back your rubber deal. Then you need an 8mm wrench. Oh, one other thing, let me put down some drip protection. Because you may have a small amount of hydraulic fluid come out. And definitely make sure that front rotor's covered. Now, loosen this nut. Now inside here is a olive, which is a little compression fitting, and an insert or a nipple that goes inside the hose. and they are a one-use item. Oh, wait a minute. Don't want to do that yet. I'm going to cut the line first to minimize the fluid loss. Now there again, I use my trusty cable cutters. You can also cut this with a mat knife like this and just lay the cable on a piece of wood and cut through it. Do not use dikes or side cutters. And the reason is you don't want to crush this line. Now you're going to need an awl. Whichever method you use, you need an awl. Get that as round as you can. Let's see, yeah, that length will be good. Now we can take that hose off. Eight millimeter. And while you're doing this, right away, slip that baby on a good line, because you can't put it on afterwards. Now these things can be kind of tight. And then get some pliers. If they're put in there right, they're tight. There we go. Make sure your rubber fit boot and the fittings on there. And see, this is a one-use item. It's a compression fitting, so when you tighten this baby down, and there's the insert inside, when you tighten it down, it crushes that brass insert, which makes it tight. So, what we're going to do now, I like to put the olive on now. You can actually slip it on afterwards if you want to. This is the olive. Should slide right over there. And this is the insert. This tiny fitting. And of course you want this to be cut as square as possible. Now a good way to hold this, Shimano brakes used to come with a little device to hold this hydraulic line, but this works just as good. They don't come with that little device anymore, and I guess they figure they don't need to put it in there because the brakes come pre-bled now. A little clothespin and a little pair of vice grips work just as good. So you get it on there all the way, and it's flush all the way around. Now, make sure your brake line is routed the way you want it to be. And that line has to be in all the way. Push your olive up there. And your nut. And what's going to happen is that nut is going to tighten down on that olive and compress it. and make the fitting tight. Now you have to make sure while you're tightening this down that you push the hose in all the way. Because it's going to leak if you don't. Like this, it's just tightened up like 7 Newton meters. I'm not sure of that, but that's in your directions. And put your plastic cover back on. Actually, let's leave that off just to make sure it doesn't leak. Just to make sure. Now, we're going to take this little cap off here. Thought it had a rubber boot on it, but apparently it doesn't. I get an Allen wrench. That feels right. There we go. Now there's a little rubber O-ring in here that you do not want to lose. I'll just stick it right back on there. Set this aside. Now you need a bleed kit. This some mineral oil. I always like to put a little bit of oil on those O-rings. You get these bleed kits on Amazon, they're pretty cheap. Also a little O-ring on this jobby. Shouldn't take much fluid at all. Now, once you get it all like that, and this would be the highest point in the system, then you can bleed your brakes. Pump them a little bit to get a teeny bit of air bubble out of there. I didn't see any air come out. But then to undo it, put the little stopper back in, unscrew it. There again, you might have a teeny bit of oil come out. Now, this fluid is still clean, so you can put it back in your mineral oil bottle. Now, I'll take care of that in a minute. Now, all you gotta do is put your plug back in. There again, little teeny bit of this oil is going to come out. Obviously, make sure your O-ring's on there. And you're done. In like Flynn. No leaks. No leaks. Put the rubber boot on. Voila. Hydraulic brakes. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. I plan on doing a lot more like this. The next one I do will probably be on my bike rack on the back of my truck. And then I'm going to show you all how I've upgraded this bike by quite a bit. That's it for now. Go out and make yourself a good day. Go out and ride your mountain bike. One of 20. Starting to grab good now. Oh yeah. Pretty good. Try them both. Oh yeah, you're ready. Now the rest of it can bed in on the trail. It'll lock up both wheels on the pavement. So I'm happy. Hope you all are too. Show you a few close-ups here. Here's the front brake installed. You have to use this spacer here to change from 160 to 180. Always route your cable inside the fork tubes. These are Shimano, I think they're called MB200s. It's the least expensive Shimano you can buy in hydraulic brakes. And they worked fine. They're 2-piston brakes. Here's the rear one. Calipers are exactly identical to front and rear. Of course, the only difference is the cable routing. And here in America, I've got the front on the left and rear on the right.